Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Coffee with Carl. My name is Carl Zoellner. I'm one of the attorneys with Anderson Business Advisors, and today we want to talk a little bit about expensing education costs. Now, expensing education costs can be incredibly valuable, but one thing I want to chat about first is it's sort of a misnomer in what we're expensing or how we would do it. So depending on what you're doing for your type of investing, whether stock trading, real estate, almost any line of business you're entering into, one of the biggest hurdles is being able to expense the cost of that education. So say I enter into a real estate training course, spend $50,000. I wasn't already in the previously in that line of business. It's going to be very difficult for me to expense those costs. Some of the CPAs out there will tell you to just take that expense on your Schedule C. That is, to me, very risky, as well as creates an audit risk. In my opinion, and in our opinion, the best way to go about this is to actually set up a corporation, a C corporation specifically, if you're not already in that line of business, and then include that education cost as a startup expense to the business. Now, we call it education cost because that's the easiest way that people understand it, because they paid for education to learn how to do these certain types of investing. But like I said, when we're actually capturing it, we're capturing it as an as a startup cost to the C corporation, meaning it's due back as a reimbursement, since if I paid out of pocket for it, which most of our clients have. So let's talk about for a second how that works. Number one, go to a real estate education class or a stock trading class. Say I spent overall maybe $50,000. Normally that would be on one of, a credit card or potentially out of a bank account if you have that cash available. Now I paid for that expense. Now come around, we come to an Anderson Advisors asset protection class, and I want to be able to capture that expense. I may have just looked at it before as something I just spent money on, like tuition, and that's all there is to it. But there is a way to capture it. So come to an Anderson Advisors asset protection class. I now am setting up a C corporation, preferably within 6 to 8 months of when I had those education costs. The sooner the better, because like I said, we're capturing as startup costs, and after 6 to 8 months, it gets a little bit more sketchy on capturing that expense. However, the IRS guidelines do not state how close it has to be to when you are starting the business. However, we just found that 6 to 8 months is sort of the longest time you want to go before setting up that corporation to do that. So under the corporation, we capture that expense because it's ultimately going to be to benefit the business. The corporation then is able to expense or deduct $5,000 the first year, then has to amortize it over the next 180 months. However, if I paid for it out of pocket, that full reimbursement is due back to me. So as soon as I have the cash available, I can reimburse myself as soon as the cash is available, but the corporation will have to deduct it over time. But it's a great way to capture the education expense. Like I said, normally for those of you who are getting into a new line of business, you'd be looking at a C corporation to be able to do this. And it's incredibly important to get that corporation set up as soon as possible, as close to the time you're actually incurring those expenses for the education. This is one way we use to capture expenses. It's a great way to do it. As I mentioned in prior videos, the real benefit of having an asset protection structure from the tax perspective is by, in fact, creating that new taxpayer, meaning the C corporation, because it files its own 1120 return. So by creating that separate taxpayer, it creates some great flexibility in some planning for your business, as well as retirement accounts, things like that, that you can build off of that corporation. Normally if a client comes to me and asks me, maybe I can only start in one place, what do I need to start with? Normally I will start with a corporation just for the flexibility in the tax planning side, and then build on over time. As always, if you please keep taking advantage of all of our free content, YouTube channel, Toby's Got Tax Tuesday, and there's a ton of it out there. anything interests you, of course, please always give us a call. You're welcome to have a free consultation. We'll tell you what we would suggest from both the asset protection side as well as the tax planning side, so that you can have a comprehensive solution to how you're running your business. And as always, appreciate your time, and I'll catch you on the next Coffee with Carl.